for short, by Singapore Computer Society and IMDA at the recent TechCube Forum on 16 October 2020. The launch event was graced by guest of honor Mr. S. Iswaran, Minister for Communication and Information. Since the launch of the BOK, I'm pleased to share that the BOK microsite had garnered more than 400 views from Singapore and other countries like India, the US, Brazil, UAE, Germany, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Malaysia. Later on, definitely we will share the link to this microsite. During the seminar, please do listen attentively as we will be giving away JBL wireless earbuds worth $149 to 10 lucky winners who can answer 2 of the questions posed correctly at the end of the seminar. So do watch out for it. Without further ado, let us welcome Ms. Annabelle Lee from the AI Ethics and Governance Body of Knowledge and Certification Committee, and also the Public Policy Lead for Data APAC, Amazon Web Services, to share more on the SCS AI Ethics and Governance Toolkit. Annabelle, please.
Very good afternoon, everybody, and I echo my colleague Darryl in welcoming everyone and thanking everyone for spending time with us today. I'm going to provide a brief overview of AI ethics and governance, and I think why it matters. But I think before we jump into that, just a bit of background for those who haven't been following us closely, what's been going on in Singapore around AI ethics and governance. So, to start with, really about 2 years ago, the Singapore government developed the Model AI Governance Framework. That was 1.0, and you'll notice the slide says 2.0 because they did update it this year. Again, and the intention of the government really to kind of develop this framework and then publish it was to help encourage companies who were thinking about deploying AI to do so in a manner in which it would be able to do so in a safe and manner that would enable companies to also do it responsibly while being able to access the benefits of that the AI could bring. So this framework was published in 2019 and updated again in 2020. It was also first in world in terms of the level of detail that it went into, the kinds of illustrations and use cases, which were meant to be very practical, really to help companies who were already interested in maybe deploying AI in their existing processes to be able to do so quite confidently. As part of kind of the updated 2.0 version of the Model AI Governance Framework, the Infocomm Media Development Authority issued this year as well a companion self-assessment guide to the Model AI Governance Framework. This guide was really intended to help companies, find a way to understand whether or not what they were doing already in their existing processes were meeting the kinds of principles that were articulated in the Model AI Governance Framework. So kind of as a quick and easy way for companies to be able to see if what they were doing already in their existing processes were aligned to those principles. So why is this so important? I think at the end of the day, everybody recognizes that there are lots of possibilities, lots of ways in which AI could potentially improve efficiencies and work processes. But a lot of the time, that maybe you might have heard, either in the media or maybe through movies and so on and so forth, that, AI might be this scary thing. And so, there's a lot of unknowns when deploying AI. And so the Singapore government was really committed in trying to allay any confusions or fears around AI deployment by providing a very clear pathway by which most companies could deploy AI if they were interested in doing so in a safe and responsible manner. So just to be very clear as well to everybody listening in today, neither the AI governance framework nor the self-assessment guide is mandatory. It's not a regulatory requirement from the Singapore government. It's completely up to companies to voluntarily decide to adopt it. And it's really more intended as a guiding process. And so as IMDA started building out, various documents and tools for companies, they realized that a very important part of this entire, of leveling up the ability of Singapore's companies and also professionals in Singapore to be able to adopt AI, in a very ethical and responsible manner. A very important part of that was ensuring that, the right kinds of support was put in place for capacity building. And when I talk about capacity building, I mean helping professionals, individuals, employees, and companies who are implementing AI solutions to actually have the right training and skill sets to be able to do so. And so as a result of that, as you can see from the quote below, in October of 2019, IMDA came together with SES to form an Ethics and Governance Steering Committee. This AI Ethics and Governance Steering Committee it was intentionally industry-led. So it was driven by the actual users of these AI solutions. And it was intended to then take what was in the Model AI Governance Framework and to develop certification courses and training courses to help professionals be better able to be confident, to learn about and then be confident about their ability to select for the right AI products and services and deploy them in a live setting. So very quickly, if you see, we then, therefore, SES then developed a certification in AI governance and ethics for project and product managers. And you will notice that the choice of focusing on project managers and product managers was very deliberate. The reason is because when we often think of AI, again, it sounds like something that maybe is the role of the software developer or someone who is more technical. But in reality, a lot of the time, a lot of the decisions that need to be made in relation to governance and ethics really fall in the hands of the project or product managers, and sometimes in some cases further up the leadership chain. So the idea was therefore to train and certify professionals responsible for implementing these AI solutions to ensure that the AI is deployed responsibly, and also to help them have then the tools and the mechanisms to be able to talk to their own leadership about why and how AI has been deployed safely. At the same time, an expert panel was appointed to assist organizations to provide independent assessment. And so what really that meant was helping, or rather creating a professional group almost of people who were now certified in AI governance and ethics, and to come together to then help organizations implement model frameworks or help assess the implementation of this model framework. So the idea is really to, I guess, create a community of practice in some shape and form of experts in this area. Next slide, please. I think this is, we have the honorary patron for this project, Dr. Yaacob Ibrahim. Many maybe are very familiar with him already, but Dr. Yaacob is now the advisor of the Office of the President, as well as director for the Community Leadership and Social Innovation Center of the Singapore Institute of Technology.
AI ethics is about ensuring that whatever decisions are made by the machine or algorithm are fair, just, and transparent. And the whole issue of governance is about how you manage the system to ensure that those are the outcomes you want. It's important for us to educate the public only because AI will become pervasive. It will touch all aspects of our lives, from the things we do at home, the things we do at work, when we go shopping, and when we go online. So people need to understand that algorithms and machines are making decisions on their behalf. And therefore, they need to be educated so that at the end of the day, they understand their rights when it comes to their relationship with these algorithms. They must have the right to question those decisions made by the machines. They have the right of explainability, where the owners of the machines must be able to explain to the public. The public must be aware that as more machines are being used, they must continue to exert their right to be able to understand what is going on behind the algorithms.
Very briefly then, in terms of AI ethics and governance milestones. So as I briefly mentioned, we developed the SES's AI ethics steering group based on IMDA's Model AI Governance Framework. As I mentioned, the second edition was revealed this year, and the first edition was actually launched at the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2019. So that followed the launch of the AI Ethics and Governance Book of Knowledge, a body of knowledge, at the SES VTechCube Forum 2020. So this was really only in October 2020, so very recently, about 2 months ago, SES launched this body of knowledge. Now, the body of knowledge is actually a very comprehensive book. It's meant to be a living document, and so it will be updated from time to time, and it covers about 200 pages worth of really key explanations of what AI ethics and governance is. And giving very good case studies and examples of how, I guess, some of the potential challenges that could come about when deploying AI, and some of the ways in which companies have thought about it and tried to solve it as well. So as you can tell, as mentioned on the slide, this BOK is first in world, and it does cover multiple areas of AI ethics and governance. It was developed by industry for industry, and so I think in that regard, a lot of the use cases will resonate with professionals who are thinking of deploying AI very, very well. So in terms of the toolkit itself, SES also created an AI ethics and governance toolkit. That's what everybody here is going to listen to about. And really the objective was to provide a very, very brief overview of AI ethics and governance. So it really should only take about 5 minutes of your time to look through this toolkit. And the key objectives are to introduce and enhance understanding of AI ethics and governance, as well as to create greater awareness amongst both ICT and also non-ICT professionals. Because remember, again, even though AI is a form of technology, a lot of people who are using it may not be ICT professionals. It acts therefore as a primer for professionals who are keen to acquire the AI ENG training and certification, as I briefly talked about earlier. Next slide, please. And so we're going to try and play you the toolkit video. I'm also being told that the previous video that we weren't able to show is actually available on our Facebook and LinkedIn pages. And the link is available in the chat for anybody who would like to kind of take a note of it and check it out later. With that, can we maybe play the toolkit video?
The term artificial intelligence, or AI, can seem so futuristic and mystifying. But what if I told you it's already part of our daily lives? No matter where we are in life, AI has impacted our daily lives. From automated customer interactions, improved personalized shopping experiences, and operational automation, AI can be implemented seamlessly to improve our way of living. AI has proven to streamline businesses, client experience, boosting productivity, and thus increasing revenue. Whilst all this talk about AI may seem new and exciting, it also raises a concern regarding its ethics. If AI is not deployed properly, it could cause harm, damage reputation, or contain legal risks. Technology itself is neutral, and it is important for people and organizations to understand and be accountable to the risks involved in AI application and implementation. The development of AI must be human-centric, with fair outcomes, ultimately aiming to enhance our quality of life. It must also be transparent and explainable, where the purpose of the AI program is clearly stated and easy for users to understand. Thus, professionals in AI ethics have built a comprehensive authoritative book called The Body of Knowledge, or BOK. It aims to serve as a guide that defines what is considered ethical implementation in the field of AI technology. Ultimately, AI, as with any tool or entity, when used reliably and honestly, can help improve our lives while building a dependable platform for which we as a society can build our future upon. That is why it is important that we focus on understanding AI ethics and implementing it in a principled manner.
All right, so as you know, we're very excited to then hear a little bit more about the body of knowledge. But thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Annabelle. Next, now let us invite the Chief Editor of the AI Ethics and Governance Body of Knowledge, Mr. Raju Chellam, to give us a brief overview of the BOK. Raju?
Hi. Yep. Thanks, Daryl. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure and honor and privilege to be speaking before you on a very vital piece of AI ethics that will impact each one of us, including you and me. Next slide, please. Okay, so giving you a brief overview, the AI ethics body of knowledge is the world's first such endeavor that encompasses all the areas of AI ethics, including internal governance that companies must follow, human centricity, where the human is the centerpiece of all AI and all AI ethics, operations management, which means how you operate AI ethics, how you embed AI ethics into any AI algorithm or machine learning that you deploy or develop and open it to the public. And finally, stakeholder communications, which is how do you handle stakeholders across the broad spectrum of all communities. And there are 6 kinds of stakeholders that a company has to handle or address. Number 1 is their shareholders, because shareholders need to know whether ethical principles have been used in the development and deployment of AI. Number 2 is consumers, who are people like you and me, because consumers will get impacted by the effect of AI algorithms making decisions on behalf of the company or the bank or the healthcare institution or the government agency without, or in most cases without, human intervention. Number 3 are the staff or employees of the company. Are they aware? Because the staff, especially the frontline staff, are the ambassadors of the company, and they are the ones touching the consumer, who are you and me. Are they aware that AI is being used? Are they aware of how AI is being used? What are the decisions AI is making with or without human intervention? Number 4 are the regulators, the government agencies like MAS for the banking sector, like HSA, Health Sciences Authority for medical devices implanted like your pacemaker, like the Ministry of Health for all other healthcare matters. Are they aware or are they updated on how AI is being used by companies in various decisions made on behalf of the company automatically? And the last 2 are the community, which is you and me, the consumers, right? And the media. The media is the most important because it's not just the traditional media, but the social media as well, which amplifies all of the stuff that goes on. So a single mistake, a single ethical misdemeanor by a company can get amplified around the world. That's why companies, governments, and institutions are taking AI ethics very, very seriously. So how is the AI body of knowledge displayed for you to check out? Here is the slide that shows you about all the topics regarding the AI ethics body of knowledge, and you can go in and click on any of those and read 90% of those for free, especially things like the introduction, the preamble. The preamble has got uh, top line leadership and top line thought leadership studies or papers written exclusively for the body of knowledge from the likes of Professor Yaqub Ibrahim, Justice V.K. Raja, who is the chairman of the Advisory Council on the Ethical Use of AI and Data, from Dr. Tan Eng Chai, who is the president of NUS, from Dr. Subra Suresh, who is the president of NTU, from Dr. James Yip, who is the chief medical informatics advisor, National University Hospital, and the chief data advisor, Ministry of Health. So go in and check it out. There is also an introduction chapter, which is free for everyone to read. It gives an overview of the genesis of how the AI ethics body of knowledge came about, how $500 million has been allocated by Deputy Prime Minister Heng Swee Keat, November 2019, for developing AI and imbibing ethics into all of the stuff that we expect a company to do, which is part of corporate ethics. Next slide, please. So that comes to the end of my presentation, and I will be happy to get all your questions on the chat group so that I can answer you individually and collectively. Thank you very much. Back to you, Daryl.
Thank you, Raju. Our next speaker this afternoon is Mr. Joey Pang, one of the authors of the AI Ethics and Governance BOK. He's also the Senior Vice President, Legal and Compliance of DBS Bank. Joey will share more with you on what deepfakes entails. Joey, please.
I'm here to talk to you about deepfakes, and I'm not sure whether or not you have encountered what deepfakes are, but by way of background, deepfakes are basically using of an AI to generate the likeness of a person, be it a likeness in terms of a voice, to synthetically generate the voice of someone, an image of someone, or a video of someone. So that's what essentially the deepfake technology is, and that's what essentially deepfake in the context of AI means. So why is there an issue in relation to deepfake? Because I think while it's very clear that there are legitimate use of deepfake technology, such as those used in films, such as those used for testing of certain biometric systems, this may not always be ethically so clear. So I think one good example where ethically there may not be too much of a problem when you use in films is if you're a Star Wars fan, like I am, you'll recall there's a scene of Carrie Fisher in one of the later Star Wars installations where she appeared, even though we know for a fact that she has passed on. So that's how powerful technology is in terms of being able to replicate her likeness, even though it is not always possible to do so in the past. This is possible now. But the use of deepfakes becomes a big issue when deepfakes are used to create or go into morally unsatisfactory kinds of position. So one example where deepfake is a big problem is when it's being used for illegal purposes. So I think that concept is quite intuitive. Illegal purposes will be things like, for instance, using it to defraud someone, passing off at someone, being a con man, using the voice of someone to try to bypass biometrics or phone banking type of security, or trying to basically just use to commit other sort of criminal offenses. So that part, I think, is quite clear that it's not ethical and it's also criminal. But I think where the line sort of gets blurred a bit are the following two types of situation. One, in relation to deepfake creating unsavory or offensive content. So in countries where there's a liberal slant towards greater freedom of expression, it can be taken as far as creating pornography using the likeness of celebrity, and in the name of freedom of expression, which is deeply unsatisfying and offensive to the subject. It can be also unsavory. For instance, you may put them in a context which they otherwise are not in. So we saw a lot of parody and comedy videos featuring that sort of deepfakes. On the other end, you also have deepfakes that are problematic because they misrepresent or they mislead the public into thinking that a certain person has done certain things. And in that regard, I think it's not too far a memory where we see during the US political elections recently, several political actors has been shown to basically be saying things or doing certain things, but actually they are not doing those things at all. So deepfakes have a deep issue in relation to authenticity, and the inability, and the reason why it's called a deepfake is for a human actor to spot what is real and what is not real, then led on to a bigger issue in relation to whether it is fake news, about the veracity of the source of the news. And generally deepfakes then, when used in inappropriate context, then create a mistrust within the society. So there's a creation of a lack of trust. So ethically, that's questionable. And I think if it's just about scanning the horizon, you also find that there are also things that are somewhat in the gray zone now in terms of deepfakes, on whether or not the use of deepfake technology is for the good or not so good. So one example of that would be in relation to using deepfakes for bereavement therapy. Someone passes away, you create the likeness of someone to create some kind of therapy for those who are mourning the loss of their loved ones. I believe this was one of the episodes in Black Mirror, taken in a very extreme form, but these things are happening in real life. So the verdict is still out there in terms of how you can use deepfakes to do a multitude of things, including for bereavement therapy, but it's still not so clear in terms of ethically where all this lies. So what does this mean in terms of deepfake as a use case and as a technology in relation to how it's being powered by AI? I think it comes back to a fundamental position that there is the need for producers of such technology to have a good view of how they police the end use of that technology. So in a way, it's not too dissimilar to certain types of technology, like encryption or dual use technology more generally, that there's a sort of an obligation, albeit not a legal one, for you to know who are the ultimate consumers and the end users of your technology. And equally for companies wishing to make use of this technology for their own commercial purposes or for any other purposes, I think it is something to take note of, that you need to be also very mindful of whether or not the use of deepfakes is within the culture of the company and the risk appetite of your company in relation to the use case that you're using. And where you are not so sure and you're using someone's likeness, for instance, it is often not a bad idea to just get the blessing of the subject of your likeness. So for instance, if it's a celebrity ABC and you're going to use AI to generate celebrity ABC's likeness to maybe for a commercial for your product, to show some funny situation, I don't think it's too much to ask for you to try to get the blessing of the subject of celebrity ABC in relation to using them or their likeness in whatever campaigns that you're using before you actually go forth and produce those content. So I think it comes back to what we have said a lot of times in the BOK in many different ways. In one sense, it's really about operationalizing AI as a technology and deploying the same sort of risk management frameworks that you have in your arsenal to try to adapt them for a technology that now has vast potential. So the lens of looking at things may be different, but the sort of judgment that you need to exercise, the sort of decency that you need to have will remain the same. And the other thing is that regardless of what the technology is, I think ultimately it is about value judgment at the end of the day, be it from a producer point of view in terms of producers of technologies of deepfakes, or a consumption point of view in terms of a consumption of the technology to produce content using deepfakes. So there is a line to be drawn here, and companies will be well served to be accountable for the way that they use that. And within the AI ethics and governance BOK, we have different ways and methods in which you can demonstrate and satisfy your own accountability in relation to the use of technology of AI, including for deepfakes. Yeah. So I will end here in relation to my short explanation of the use case for deepfakes. I noted that there are some questions here and there in relation to whether POFMA can be used, perhaps whether defamation laws can be used. I think all these are possibilities in relation to how we can do this. But the truth of the matter is that I think if we are thinking of all these things, perhaps it's really something that is too late from a company point of view, because I think as a company, you will want to proactively and preemptively try to do these things before they even reach the stage of having to resort to a legal and very public sort of measure to deal with those things. Yep. So that's it for my segment. And I'll hand over the next part of the segment to Reno De Silva from Gojek, who will talk to you also about inspection drones as the next use case. So Reno, please.
Thank you, Joey. Good afternoon, everyone. Could we have the next slide, please? While we're waiting for the slide, some of the use cases that I'm planning to talk about will help to illustrate issues related to human centricity. The opposite of human centricity is autonomous AI. And the best way for us to start thinking about this is to recognize that there are 4 key values that all AI systems need to respect. The first of these is fairness. We want to make sure that whatever the outcomes are from an AI system, they apply in a way that is treating people fairly and is not biased towards one group of people or against another group of people. A second key value is reliability and safety. We want to make sure whenever AI systems are used that they ensure safety of human beings. A third key value is privacy and security. And a fourth is inclusiveness, which means the AI system must ensure that it doesn't exclude some people due to inherent biases in the way in which it has been trained. And overlying all of these 4 values is transparency, which ensures that people understand why the AI system is making certain decisions, and accountability, which means that the AI system is held accountable and we know which parts of the system are accountable for which decisions. Could we have the next slide, please? In the AI BOK, in chapter 4 on human centricity, the authors have provided a very helpful grid to help us understand the way of thinking about autonomy and what level of autonomy should be given to an AI system. One of the key factors here is the severity and reversibility of harm to human beings. Now, when we say harm, what do we mean? Please remember those 4 values, right? We want to make sure that we are not violating any of those 4 values. Now, the severity of the harm could be trivial, could be minor, moderate, extreme. These are somewhat judgmental and subjective factors. What we've done in the BOK is try to explain what they actually mean. An extreme impact would be a life-altering consequence, an environmental disaster, systemic risk to the economy or society. These are irreparable externalities. Whereas a trivial would be that you barely notice the effects or there are some minor annoyances. Now, what should you do when there is a high probability of extreme impact? What the BOK recommends is that actually no AI system should be allowed to operate in this area. If there is an occasional probability of a moderate impact, the BOK recommends that you could consider a human over the loop or a human in the loop. A human in the loop is a system in which an AI is making recommendations, but a human has oversight of those recommendations before any action is taken. Now let's go to the next slide. I'll show a few examples to explain how these things are playing out in real life today. One example is these inspection drones. Now, an inspection drone can go over a neighborhood, or it can go over a construction site, or it can go over a bridge, and it can examine that area or that geography for potential issues, for potential dangers, for potential flaws. And at the moment, we have these drones in the world today. You may not have noticed them, but they are out there, and these are actually fully automated systems. Now, the important thing to remember is that they are automated systems that are allowed to fly and are allowed to assess what is happening and to take pictures and to make judgments based on those pictures, but they can't make any decisions after that. If a bridge is flawed, this drone cannot decide that the bridge should be brought down or the bridge should be repaired. It passes that information or recommendation to a human, and the human decides what should ultimately be done. So in a larger sense, the AI drone is part of a system in which there is a human in the loop. And this is an important concept. Next slide, please. Could you click on the slide? So this is an example of an inspection drone which is given autonomy to fly over an electrical grid and to assess whether there are any risks. Are there birds building nests? Are there trees which might fall onto the grid? Is there any risk of a damage or for fire of an accident? Now, in certain places, after prolonged usage, these drones are being allowed to make autonomous decisions to shut down the grid if they sense a risk. And one reason is that when you weigh the potential impact to human life, it is better for a quick decision to be made to shut down the grid with some moderate economic impact than for a late decision to be made with potential human life lost. And so that's how these kind of ethical decisions are made, whether there should be a human in the loop or not. Next slide, please. The next slide. Now, another area in which we are seeing a lot of automation, we're seeing a lot of AI, is food manufacturing. What you see here is a robot that is being used by Domino's Pizza in many of their worldwide pizza manufacturing centers. Now, what is interesting though is that they have made a policy decision that no robot will be allowed to autonomously make a pizza from start to finish. Could we have the next slide, please? This is a video from a company called Zoom. This was a startup which promised to have robots making pizzas end to end. But you notice at the beginning there was a human being. And we'll see what happens at the end of this pizza making process. There is a human being yet again. And the reason is that this is food, and the potential harm to human life or human health from something going wrong in the process is just too high. And we have not yet reached the stage where we can have autonomous AI systems producing food. So there is a human, if not in the loop in every process, over the loop, what we call supervising what the AI system is doing. Next slide, please. Could we have the video? This is an infamous example. You may have seen this on YouTube. This is a fully autonomous AI system, and it is out there in the world today. Many people own vehicles with this system. This system has significant risks. Could we see the next slide? The risk of driver inattention and over-reliance on an AI system is what you see in this video. And these systems were actually allowed to be used by people. And because of these horrible accidents, they have now taken a step back. And the system now has a sensor which recognizes whether the driver's hands are on the steering wheel. And if you remove your hands from the wheel, the system then gives you a warning and potentially even shuts down the vehicle. Of course, if you fall asleep with your hands on the wheel, there is nothing which can be done. So we don't yet have a system for that. But what this illustrates is the risk of releasing into the world a fully autonomous AI system, which carries risks not only to the person who's using it, but also to other people in other vehicles, completely no fault of theirs. Next slide, please. This is Inspector Cliff. He's a chatbot who represents the Singapore police force. Now, it's extremely important in situations like this that the chatbot is trained or is designed to escalate to a human being when the time is right. We cannot rely on a chatbot for an emergency service such as the police to be fully autonomous. And indeed, that is the case here. But the chatbot can be of help, can handle some minor inquiries, can help people with some small issues, and can also serve as an incoming filtration system, which then escalates the more important issues to people, or perhaps escalates to the right people. Next slide. This is the last slide. So just to remind you of the 4 values that we need to keep in mind when deciding about whether a system should be autonomous or whether it should have a human in the loop: fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, and inclusiveness. And always remember what is the potential for harm to human beings' well-being, whether it is financial well-being or health or any other form of well-being of human beings together as a society.
Thanks, Reynald, for the sharing. So now do we have the discussion and Q&A?
Yes, Daryl, I think we can. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Yokwa here. I'm the chairperson of the AI Ethics BOK and the Certification Committee. There are a few questions in the chat. Maybe, Daryl, we can go through the question one by one. Yeah, I think quite a few of you asked about the BOK, how to access it. Raju has already put up the link. You can access the BOK through the link. It is a microsite. Then the other question is, can you all download the entire BOK? Won't be the entire BOK. The BOK is about 700, close to 800 pages. But of course, you know, you can download chapter by chapter. But on the other hand, we encourage you not to download the entire BOK because of the green reason. I think we have to save some trees. Another reason is it is a living document. So even though we have launched the BOK, you know, in October, Raju, our chief editor, and also our authors, there are 30 over authors, they have been updating the BOKs as well when they have new use case and all this. And on top of that, SCS has conducted a few rounds of industry briefing. We have briefed the corporates and associations, different associations, as well as the technology partner. Many of them like to contribute to the BOK. So this document won't be like version 1, then frozen for 1 year, that kind of situation. So, you know, we encourage you to really assess the BOK as and when you need to see certain things, yeah. But the answer is yes, you can download chapter by chapter, right? Yeah. There is a small token, there's a more fee, you know, applicable for accessing the BOK. If you are SCS members, it's only about $30. So we encourage all of you to join as an SCS member. If you are non-member, then it's more than $30. I can't remember the fee, right? Yeah. Now we go on to some of the technical questions. One question asked is which function of an organization should be responsible for the AI ethics? Is it the IT department, compliance, legal, right? And who is the most appropriate one? Raju has replied in the chat, right? Yeah. From our discussion with the corporate and our first discussion with the corporate, mostly the C-level, the C-level feel that, you know, they are responsible because ultimately they are the one that, you know, making all the decision. There is also suggestion by the corporate and also from the association as well to conduct executive education for the C-level as well as the board level. But this AI ethic and governance BOK, it is what we call a stackable competency. Just now, Annabelle, when she talked about the background, if you see if you read the text, our original thinking was for the project manager and product manager, because the project manager and product manager, they are responsible for the implementation of some of the AI project. They may not be the AI specialist or AI engineer, but they ought to be aware and they ought to follow certain guidelines when they manage a project in terms of AI ethics and governance. As you can see, our author list, okay, Zoe, our first speaker actually is from the legal background, and our author list, we have few legal person as well. So they are also, responsible for AI ethics and governance, right? So to answer the question, who is responsible? I think everybody is responsible, but of course the C-level is accountable, for the AI ethics and governance, right? So Raju, do you want to further supplement my answer for this responsibility part?
Yep. So thanks, Yukwa. As I have said, the buck stops with the CEO. That's not just in case of ethics of a corporate nature, but also in case of algorithms. That's because the algorithms developed by the company and put into general use are taking decisions on behalf of the company, even though no human being is possibly involved in the decision. But if the decision impacts people adversely, the CEO and the board of directors will be held responsible, at least morally, if not legally at this point, because there are no legal statutes in place. As you know, legislation always comes after the technology is a little mature. So that's my point of view, and that's one area where the VK Justice Raja, which is the advisory council on the ethical use of AI and data, is considering right now as we speak. Thank you.
Okay. What about the other speakers? You have any view in terms of the responsibilities and the accountabilities? No. If not, then there is one question about, would it be like the act similar to PDPA? Any one of my speakers or the chief editor like to take this question? Let me answer the SES view. Okay, so we are a society, right? So we are not responsible for the legislation part. But what about our speaker here, Joey? You want to answer this question? Would it be intact as an act similar to the PDPA?
I think it's a bit okay. So I think it depends. I don't think it's going to be lock, stock, and barrel transposed into legislation in the same way as PDPA has. And if you take a look at how Singapore has legislated on technology generally, we have taken a very cautious and liberal approach in terms of trying to be as agnostic as possible. This is done with the policy intention of not trying to stifle innovation, because I think over-prescriptive regulation tends to stifle and steer innovation one way or the other. So I think the government, at least in the AI space and even in the data space more generally, including in the PDPA, has taken a very calibrated and deliberate approach in terms of legislation. So the PDPA was passed in 2012, and we only had the amendment to the PDPA in 2020. So we took a lot of time to consult and to ensure that we had the right sort of outcomes by co-opting all the different views. For AI regulation and I guess on the ethics and governance piece, it doesn't look likely that regulation or legislation is going to be immediately available, if only because I think that the landscape and the technology and the social consensus are all not well formed yet. But what is clear is that it doesn't mean that we don't do anything about it, and that we can still have leadership by providing guardrails and guidelines, and in this case, certain ethical standards for companies and for individuals to comply with in relation to the deploying of such technologies. So my long answer summarized in one sentence is it is very unlikely that it will come out in the same form as a PDPA type of legislation for now. But eventually, even if it comes out as a legislation, that probably will be segmented quite differently depending on the prevailing societal attitudes and the prevailing economic and legal climate of that time. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, so I would like to address the, or ask my speaker and the chief editor to address the last question, then I go on to my briefing. So one question asked by Freddie, can more be done to guide the projects and the business user on how to explain the black box and the bias carefully and clearly, right? So this will be helpful to guide the regulatory compliance with international regulation, such as the GDPR and etc. Right? Yeah. Raju, I believe our BOK has some guideline in terms of the black box and the biasness, right? Yeah.
Yes, so let me answer that first, and then I will probably ask Renaud to answer because he's an author who has also spoken on that and written about it. So what is a black box, first of all? A black box is an AI algorithm that takes decisions without a human being in the middle or having an oversight of how the decision was taken. Therefore, from an algorithmic point of view, the machine is using all of the data that it was trained on and using that training to come to a decision without human involvement. Therefore, it's the first time in the history of mankind that a machine is taking such a major decision. For example, in an autonomous car, whether to strike down and hit a person or crash into a tree so that it misses hitting the person, but then it kills the driver or kills the passengers inside the car. So these are ethical decisions that a machine is required to take, and that's where we come in from. So coming back to the gist of the question, yes, there will be issues that will concern not just the legislators, but also programmers. And therefore, the CEO will have to ensure that whatever decisions are taken by the machine inside the black box is explainable, is transparent, is fair, and it is unbiased. So I will stop there.
Yeah, okay. Yes, Renaud, you want to say something? Yeah, you're on your screen, yeah.
I would add a couple of points to this. And I would say that it depends a great deal on the context. And the context tells us about what the potential risks are. And when those risks are known, how much effort do you need to make to prevent them is better understood. If you take, for example, Raju mentioned the self-driving cars. If you look at the auto industry, it has come a long way over the years. Regulations have been put in to mandate seat belts. Regulations have been put in to mandate airbags, right? You could argue that these might have been done by the companies, and some of them indeed were innovations created by auto companies, but it's the regulations which have ensured that they have become widespread standards. So I think that would be the last level of regulation which we would see in some of these areas. Before that, I believe that we'll see self-regulation within industries. Industry bodies will form to establish what the ground rules are. We'll see self-regulation within companies, not just the CEO, but also potentially independent ethics committees or independent ethics officers. And I think most importantly, we will need people who are working on these systems and designing the systems to have their own moral compass or ethical compass. We can't just rely on companies with profit motives to make the right decisions all the time. There will always be pressure on to do the right thing by shareholders first. And it's important for practitioners to have that ethical compass and be almost like the first and last line of defense to ensure that systems are not created which have potential harmful impact.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now I have, there are still many questions in the chat and the Q&A, and I noticed that more questions are coming in. We won't have time to answer all the questions. I need to go on to brief everybody the training and the certification, and most importantly, there's lucky draw, right? Now, but all these questions, would not be, just post for the sake of posting. One of the reasons for all this webinar and industry briefing is for SCS to collate all your feedback, right? So some of these questions that in the chat and also in Q&A, we are going to collate it as a feedback, and we are going to publish it as well, yeah? And some of the feedback we will consider, to incorporate certain content in the BOK, could be a new chapter and all these things, right? So please, while I'm talking, if you have certain question, a suggestion and feedback, please type it in the chat or the Q&A. We will document everything. Rachel, can we have the slide back? Yeah. Now, there are questions about the training and education. When Annabelle made the presentation, the first slide, we call it the 2x2 framework. At the SCS level, our job is to develop or to, work with partners, work with the corporate, and also work with IHL to develop a pool of talent, right? Yeah. So you look at this triangle here, the top level is the expert panel, right? So a pool of experts will be established, and they will be asked to help the organization to implement the AI in a more ethical and human manner, right? More detail will be announced later. At this moment, we are in the process of working out the detail. And the expert panel could be industry practitioner, right? Those with experience, yeah. And could be our authors as well, and also our reviewer, because they are the one that with the deep knowledge, so that they could produce this BOK, right? But this pool of expert is not just a handful. It's going to be quite a number. Okay, so we need to groom or we need to help individuals who are interested in AI ethics and governance to acquire a skill, and most importantly, to get themselves certified. So once they are trained and certified, they could be considered, to be in the expert panel. And we are still working out the criteria to select the expert, the individual to be in the panel. Now, for the professional certification, which is the green part in the triangle, we have, SCS. SCS has already confirmed a partnership with NTU. The certification title is called Certification in AI Ethics and Governance. Now, so the whole certification is based on the AI Ethics Governance BOK launched in middle of October, right? Now, who is the certification body? The certification body is SCS, Singapore Computer Society. The examination, okay, so how to be certified is through examination, right? The examination body is NTU. The MOU has been signed. Now, at this moment, the training provider is NTU, right? So NTU is going to conduct the training as part of their mini master for AI, right? So NTU conduct master, right? They just a couple of months ago, NTU has launched a mini master initiative. So the mini master is a shorter learning period as compared to the master. So part of the mini master curriculum, one part of it is our AI ethics and governance. So any individual, so the individual could be a non-IT person as well. So any PME, they could sign up this NTU training program to go for the AI ethics and governance training then when they pass the exam, the individuals or trainees, when they pass the exam, they would be the certified individual in the AI ethics and governance. And for these trainees, if they are inspired or aspire, to be trained in the AI field, they could actually carry on to study the NTU mini master as well. Now, as the slide here says that NTU is not our only training provider. Other IHL and CET center could be our training provider as well. So SCS has conducted the briefing to the university last week, and we are going to brief the Poly and the ITE next week. So we are in discussion with the university, and they could potentially be our training provider for this certification. But individual, who don't think that a formal training is required, they could actually read the BOK, right, and then go for examination, right? So later on, I will give you more information. Now, then below the professional level is the associate. So at this moment, we are thinking of working with the Poly and the ITE to create an associate route for the Poly and the ITE student, and more information will be shared later after our discussion with the Poly and the ITE. Now, the certification is not just one route, right? Yeah, we are also talking to other disciplines, right? In the university and also in the trade association. There has been discussion to certify a business leader as well, right? Yeah, and on top of the executive education, and could even be accountants, right? Legal professional, and this is only a beginning of our journey, right? And more information will be announced early next year. Rachel, next slide, please. Now, so this is the detail of this particular certification, right? Certification in AI ethics and governance. SCS is the certification body, NTU is the examination body, right? Yeah. So for the information here, the 5 module and all this, right, is the NTU module, right? Yeah. Now then, the examination fee is $180. NTU has submitted their course curriculum for approval, and SSG is going to fund the course fee and the certification fee. So the funding would be up to 90%, right? So look out for it if you are interested in this certification. And once the approval is given by SSG, NTU as well as SCS will announce the detail. Yeah. Rachel, next slide, please. Now, so we hope that, thank you very much for all your interest. I think today we have more than 100 over people attend this public awareness seminar, right? So we hope all of you could be part of this AI ethics movement in Singapore, right? Yeah. The model framework by IMDA was introduced in the World Economic Forums, the version 1.0 in 2019, right? I don't know whether Raju has mentioned that, but when Raju briefed the corporate, Raju did mention that the BOK, Singapore is among the first to come up with this AI ethics and governance BOK. And we believe that Singapore will be the first to get a group of professionals certified in this manner, right? Now, so as an individual, we hope that you can help us to share the toolkit. The toolkits, there are 2 formats, the video and also the EDM, right? So in your course of work, if you like to use our video, the toolkits video, and the EDM, the infographic EDM or the infographic booklet, right? Please feel free to do so, and you can actually help us to share the information, share the toolkits, to the wider audience. Yeah? Now, then the other one is, yes, the question just now say that our BOK, only certain information is in the public domain. Certain information, the individual need to log on. Yes, quite a bit of information, the content of the BOKs is in public domain. You don't need to log on, you can access it, right? But if you require more detail, then you need to, log on, and then if you require the information about the log on, let our secretary team know. And we hope that, you could spend some time looking at a BOK, and most importantly, give us feedback. And it is a living document. So we hope to make the BOK, more robust, right? And more use cases can be published in the BOK as well. Now, more information will be shared, right? So look out for our SCS EDM, or even our LinkedIn, like our LinkedIn, join the LinkedIn, like our Facebook. There is a social media, campaign going on. So every week we share some bite-sized video, some kind of social media feed as well. So if you need more information about our Facebook and LinkedIn, let us know. Our secretary team is more than happy to share with you. Yeah. If I'm not wrong, and this is my last slide, the next slide actually is lucky draw. Am I right, Rachel? Yeah. So let us don't go to lucky draw first. Let us go look at the question. There are a few questions here, right? Yeah. Okay. So okay. Yeah. Okay. I think we can go on to the lucky draw. I think most of the question is about the toolkit link and all this, right? And Rachel and Raju has answered already. Daryl, back to you to do the lucky draw. Yeah.
Okay. As we mentioned earlier, there is 10 these JBL Tunes earbuds, to be given away as part of the lucky draw. We're going to flash 2 questions now, and the prizes will go to the 10 lucky attendees who have given correct answers for both questions. Can we now flash the question? Yeah, the first question is, who is the honorary patron of our AI Ethics and Governance Steering Committee? And the second question is, what is the maximum SkillsFuture funding for the AI Ethics and Governance certification course and examination fees? So please scan the QR code on the screen to submit your answers. We will give you a couple of minutes to answer these questions. Okay. I think someone has some issues with the QR code. Rachel, do you have the URL by any chance? Let me see whether I can get that. actually I've shared the URL here on the chat. Thank you everyone for the attendance today and for answering these two questions. The Secretariat team will contact the 10 lucky winners on the collection of these prizes. Last but not least, please submit your feedback here. This is the QR code for the feedback form. Definitely like to get your valuable inputs for us to improve our future awareness seminars. Once again, thank you for taking time to attend our AI Ethics and Governance Why It Matters Public Awareness Seminar. We look forward to your support towards the AI Ethics and Governance Certification, BOK Toolkit, and all our awareness programs. Thank you.